if you could go back in time, what would be the one thing that you would do differently at MIoD? I was surprised at this question, but managed to reply confidently. I would be a leader of proximity. Proximity to my team, to the founders, to the patrons, members, partners, and all stakeholders. Proximity creates strategies and solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, while many of us are not governance specialists here, we can equally relate to the impacts of good and bad governance, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. It is this shared experience that has brought you all here today. It requires credible and trustworthy institutions built on principles of accountability and transparency. In fact, this is what good governance is. Accountability goes beyond the mere responsibility of delivery of a task or service. It also means answerability if a service is not delivered in a timely and efficient manner. What is true at an individual or corporate level is also true at the level of society. And this applies to MIoD as well. Let us now have a look at the key highlights of the Institute. What is the MIoD's mission? The MIoD is an agent of change, focusing on major corporate governance issues, encouraging highest business practices to directors and aspiring leaders. Our core purpose is that we are an independent and value-added partner promoting corporate governance across the board. We are very grateful today to be accompanied by loyal founders, patrons and members since the beginning of our journey, and we are also very proud to announce that BCP Bank Mauritius, TDB Group, and Scott Investment Limited have recently joined us as patrons. We have currently 1,265 members, and I'm happy to share that recently we have had some new members joining the Institute. But what is our value proposition? What's in it for you here? As you can see from the slide, our value proposition is based on 4 main pillars. The very first one relates to the learning process, consisting of the director development program, in-house training, and public workshops. The second pillar refers to the possibility of sharing insights through networking. Like this one is an example of that networking as value proposition. Our third pillar comprises of support provided to organizations, and here I am referring to board evaluations, director search, ethics assessment, corporate governance related assignments, and we believe we have the necessary expertise and tools as guided by the corporate governance specialist, Chris Pierce. We work very much in collaboration with Chris at the level of MIoD. Lastly, founders, patrons, and members they can benefit from the several advantages offered in the form, for instance, of discounts, director search, etc. So this is our value proposition. And we are proud to share with you our affinity partners, which goes to the next slide, with whom you can draw benefits to your advantage. And this is in line with the fourth pillar of the value proposition. While a value proposition is incomplete if the MIoD does not optimize on engaging with the community. We believe in collaboration, We believe in shaping synergy with the community. As the pioneer in corporate governance, the MIoD has already kick-started discussions with various players, like you can see on the slide there. We have the professional institutions, NCCG, regulatory bodies, business associations, international partners as well, the IoD UK, the IoD South Africa. And I must say that collaborative events with Data Protection Office and Financial Reporting Council will take place in February and April this year. But what about the way forward? 2020 was marked by the pandemic COVID-19, and tomorrow we might face another pandemic or another shock to the society. Reimagining MIoD for the future is crucial for its sustainability. And the way forward is to prepare a strategic plan that will be based on 5 main themes, as you can see on the slide here. Innovation, revenue generation, technology optimization, collaboration, and advocacy. Coming to the next slide, this is just for you to have a feel on the possible training events that the upcoming training sessions that have lined up for the first quarter. But please note, this is not an exhaustive list. There are many more to come, depending on the need of the market and the need of our stakeholders. It is important to note as well that the Director Development Program is our core focus, and is a prestigious program designed specifically for directors and aspiring directors. The program is run by the Open University of Mauritius and the MIoD. But what's in it for you if you follow that course? So after completion level 1, one would obtain a post-graduation certificate in corporate governance. After level 2, one will receive a post-graduation diploma in corporate governance. The certificates and diplomas will be awarded by the Open University of Mauritius. Whilst the chartered status, which is the level 3 part, this will be attributed by MIoD, subject to certain criteria that need to be assessed. The MIoD this year will proceed with level 2 of batch 1, and 2 additional batches of level 1 will be launched during the year, as can be shown there on the timeline in the slide. With all this, I can say that MIoD has now set up a solid foundation for the future. And we believe that an organization without governance is like a train without a truck. No matter how much potential the business has, it will never undergo the business transformation needed to get to where it wants, because it has nothing directing its progress. I thank you for your attention. We are talking today about an important theme, which is corporate governance in the post-COVID era. And as we all know, and we just heard it from Jane, strong and effective corporate governance helps to cultivate a company culture of integrity, leading to positive performance and an overall sustainable business. 2020 has been an exceptional year, and it was marked by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has, as you all know, affected societies and economies around the globe, including Mauritius as well. And this will permanently reshape our world, including Mauritius, as it continues to unfold. And running a business amid a pandemic has been an unprecedented challenge
for all business leaders. And this, notwithstanding the restrictions imposed by government in handling the COVID-19 outbreak, this too has raised some challenges as regards to corporate governance. And this is not a valid reason for corporate governance to be the last priority item on the board agenda. The aim of the panel discussion today is to uncover these challenges and share relevant experiences and timings. And I'm sure with the panelists that we have today, they would be pleased to, share what they've lived through this unprecedented times. So, some logistic issues to note. We have a total of 55 minutes for this panel discussion, including question times. In the first 30 minutes, the panelists will answer questions from the moderator, and then we shall open floor to questions from the audience. But before that, we'll spend about 5 minutes on this session, which I call a lightning round of questions. And as we have only 20 minutes for the question time, I would be very grateful if you could be concise in your questions and answers. And when answering a question, so please identify yourself beforehand. Okay, so we now proceed to the first question, and the first question goes to you, Runa. The NCCG was established in 2001, and it has been mandated to promote principles of good governance amongst both public and private sector. And in 2004, the NCCG published its first code of corporate governance with the help of the expert services of Mr. Mervyn King. And then later, in 2016, we have the revised code, and this was led by Professor Chris Pierce, another corporate governance specialist that has been appointed by the government at that time. And now we are 4 years later, 4 years down the line, and with the COVID-19 pandemic, which has shown that theory aside, companies cannot so easily disconnect themselves from the society at large, and they cannot ignore the risks stemming from large-scale societal problems. So, Runa, from your experience and as chair of the NCCG, do you think that our current code still fulfills stakeholder expectations in this post-COVID world?
Thank you, Sheila. Can you all hear me? I have a bit of a soft voice, so I just want to make sure I reach out to the far end. Right. Good morning, everybody. Perhaps a word of thanks to the MIoD and to Sheila for inviting me to this breakfast forum to talk about this very important subject, which is corporate governance in the post-COVID era. Now, does the code, the actual code, still fulfill stakeholder expectations? If you will recall, the code is comprised of 8 principles, right? So it has got a principles-based approach as opposed to a rules-based approach. And organizations are expected to apply those principles to their business and to explain in their annual report and our website how they have actually implemented that principle. That is the apply and explain. Those 8 principles are actually fairly elastic and can easily be adapted to a small, a medium, or a large organization. The 8 principles are still very relevant today. Post-COVID, Principles such as, for example, the risk management, composition of boards and subcommittees, directors' duties, stakeholder relations, reporting with integrity, all remain highly topical today. So yes, the code still fulfills the stakeholder expectations. Now, should the code be revised? Well, the beauty of our code is that it's simple, short, because it stands really on only 2 pages. It's user-friendly and benchmarked internationally. Since it is principles-based as opposed to rule-based, the principles are non-controversial and highly relevant today. The code also employs the apply and explain methodology, and we were the first country to adopt this new approach, and there are other countries that have followed suit subsequently. When it was implemented, the code was actually very well received internationally. And I remember when I was appointed as chairman of the NCCG, I was in Singapore and I met with representatives of the Monetary Authority Singapore, and they were actually revising their code at that time, and they saw a lot of attraction with regards to our code because of its simplicity, brevity, and the principles-based approach. Now, the code is effective since the 1st of July 2017 and was first reported upon in July 2018. So we are actually embarking on the 4th year of reporting. We need to preserve stability in our business environment, and in my opinion, it's too early to embark on a full revision of the 8 principles. This being said, there may be a case to fine-tune the guidance notes which accompany those principles. I will therefore, Sheila, take this opportunity to invite comments for fine-tuning the guidance notes. Please forward your comments to the Secretary of the NCCG, and the technical subcommittee of the NCCG will look into it towards the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Renat. So we just heard that the code is still relevant today in 2021, and maybe we can opt to fine-tune the guidance notes. Not opting, I think we'll go forward towards that fine-tuning of guidance notes. So my second question goes to you, Arno. I have recently read an article of the Harvard Business Review with the title, COVID-19 is rewriting the rules of corporate governance. And this article further states that boards are facing a complex new reality characterized by pressures and demands from various stakeholder groups, heightened expectations of societal engagement and corporate citizenship, and radical uncertainty about the future. Furthermore, these factors are complicating board decision-making and challenging the shareholder-centric governance model of governance that have guided boards and businesses for the past several decades. So, in your experience, Arno, as the former president of the NCCG and chairman of several boards, what is the field in Mauritius, and what are the challenges that businesses and boards are currently facing?
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Sheila, for having us here today. If I may, I'll probably continue in French, despite the fact that my former teacher in English, Mrs. Zukum Singh, is around. Excuse me.
Je permets, c'est une autre vie pour nous deux. Donc, je lui donne permission parce que je lui parle tout de suite en français. Merci.
Merci. Donc, là, de plaisanterie, effectivement, on est sorti d'une période où, je voudrais dire, c'était relativement cruising jusqu'en mars, février, allons dire décembre 2019, où quelque part, je pense que le secteur manufacturier, le service, le secteur financier à l'île Maurice était vraiment parti pour avoir une très belle performance, et où les rôles des conseils d'administration étaient quelque part un peu facilités, ou du moins certainement focalisés sur la croissance, sur l'investissement, sur la création de shareholders value. Et puis est arrivée donc la crise sanitaire qui s'est, comme vous le savez tous, transformée en crise sociale, en crise économique, crise politique dans certains cas, et nous a vraiment forcé à reset the clock, comme on dit. Sheila disait tout à l'heure qu'il n'y a pas donc qu'un train sans les rails ne va pas très loin. Et effectivement, je pense que les entreprises ne vont pas très loin sans une gouvernance solide. Je voudrais, sans rentrer dans une polémique, faire une petite parenthèse très rapide en disant que la même gouvernance doit également s'appliquer pour le secteur public et les gouvernements, qui, sans une gouvernance irréprochable, risquent de vraiment dérailler. Je ferme la parenthèse. Ça risque d'être assez long. Avec cette vague, je dirais que nous sommes donc depuis cette crise vraiment focalisés sur d'autres aspects que la création de valeur, qui est d'une part effectivement la préservation de nos sociétés, et la préservation de nos sociétés à travers la préservation de l'emploi, qui est une priorité en tout cas pour nous au niveau du groupe IBL. Et nous avons donc mis énormément d'énergie à s'assurer que pendant cette crise, qui dure encore, notre principal asset, qui sont donc nos employés, soit préservé. Le conseil d'administration donc ont beaucoup réfléchi à comment s'assurer de la pérennité de ces emplois, comment s'assurer à ce que le mode de rémunération soit quelque part conservé dans les secteurs en plus très compliqués comme l'hôtellerie. Il y a d'autres qui sont moins compliqués, mais enfin on dit à l'hôtellerie. S'assurer qu'on puisse continuer à rémunérer les talents d'une manière, je dirais, agressive mais intelligente, going forward, puisque un certain nombre de nos benchmarks sont partis complètement dans le canal. Et donc, il a été important de réfléchir à cette manière donc, de conserver nos talents, de conserver une motivation de nos exécutifs, de notre personnel, afin donc de permettre aux entreprises de continuer à fonctionner le plus normalement possible. La deuxième chose qui nous a beaucoup préoccupé durant cette crise et qui continue hélas à nous préoccuper, c'est l'environnement social dans lequel nous évoluons. C'est un fait que le fameux CSR a existé et existe maintenant depuis 2005, je pense, une quinzaine d'années, et que nous avons toujours fonctionné de façon assez, encore une fois, assez straightforward, où une partie des bénéfices était redéployée au niveau de la communauté. Aujourd'hui, nous avons moins de bénéfices et nous avons une communauté qui est en demande. Donc il y a vraiment une attention particulière qui est portée par les conseils d'administration pour s'assurer que nous puissions être toujours très très présents au niveau de cette communauté qui demande de plus en plus et qui malheureusement, en tout cas dans certaines régions, et je parle pour l'île Maurice, se veut être extrêmement perdu et sans doute laissé pour compte avec tout ce que ça peut impliquer comme risque derrière. Et je pense que ça fait partie de la responsabilité de nos entreprises de s'assurer que nous avons vraiment un rôle important à jouer à ce niveau-là. Il y a aussi les débats qui ont été, je dis, ad nauseam à des conseils d'administration sur tout ce qu'impliquent aujourd'hui les nouvelles normes comptables qui nous ont été imposées alors que nous avions franchement autre chose à faire. Et donc, on a eu besoin d'avoir des compétences additionnelles sur les conseils d'administration pour comprendre les conséquences de l'application de ces nouvelles normes comptables qui modifient de façon quand même structurelle nos bilans, nos comptes de résultats, et qui forcément attirent l'attention de nos banquiers avec des bilans qui sont quelque part moins solides ou plus endettés pour diverses raisons. Donc, je dois dire que l'attention du conseil d'administration a vraiment shifté sur ces derniers mois et certainement a forcé nos directeurs à travailler un peu plus. Alors, je ne dis pas que les directeurs des conseils d'administration non exécutifs ou indépendants ne faisaient pas leur fair share of a job, mais je dis qu'il y a en tout cas depuis 9 ou 10 mois une attention particulière que ces directeurs ont aujourd'hui sur le business, qui ont une obligation de regarder un business qui est beaucoup plus inclusif et qui n'est pas simplement basé sur la création de valeur, sur le share price, sur le dividend payout, qui concerne une catégorie bien particulière qui sont nos shareholders. C'est extrêmement important. Et là, je profite aussi de l'occasion pour dire que je pense qu'on a tendance à oublier que sans les shareholders, il n'y a pas de business, et qu'on a tendance à oublier que la rémunération des shareholders est également importante malgré la crise. Alors, il ne faut pas non plus prendre des décisions qui sont, je dirais, déraisonnables par rapport aux capacités de financement ou le cash flow des compagnies. Et je pense qu'il faut avoir une balance qui est correcte entre l'attention qu'on porte aujourd'hui à nos employés, l'attention qu'on porte à la communauté dans laquelle on évolue, à l'attention qu'on porte à nos clients, à nos fournisseurs qui sont bien souvent eux aussi dans des situations compliquées et qu'il faut aider pour pouvoir faire continuer à fonctionner le business. Mais ultimately, je pense qu'il ne faut pas oublier qu'il y a derrière tout ça des shareholders qui eux-mêmes ont une obligation de réinvestir ce qu'ils touchent dans la société, dans l'économie, pour la faire tourner. Et donc c'est un équilibre qui est aujourd'hui beaucoup plus précaire qu'il n'était avant et qui nécessite une attention, en tout cas vraiment particulière des conseils d'administration et des gens, exécutifs ou non d'ailleurs, qui y siègent. Et quelque part, d'avoir été partie prenante de toute cette mouvance de la gouvernance depuis une vingtaine d'années à Maurice, en tout cas, je suis très heureux d'avoir au sein du groupe IBL des conseils d'administration qui sont solides, avec des vraies compétences, qu'elles soient locales, qu'elles soient étrangères, qu'elles soient masculines, féminines. Je pense que le débat, pour moi en tout cas, n'est pas sur le gender diversity ou quoi que ce soit, mais vraiment sur la compétence que nous pouvons avoir sur les conseils d'administration, parce que les challenges sont vraiment importants aujourd'hui. Et il en va de la survie de Mauritius Incorporated as a whole, dans lequel il y a une vraie interaction nécessaire entre l'ensemble de ces stakeholders, que je viens de vous citer, mais également avec l'État. Et je dois dire que les conseils d'administration ont également passé beaucoup de temps sur ces derniers mois à comprendre la politique qui est déployée, les mesures qui sont prises et comment effectivement s'adapter pour s'assurer qu'il y ait une continuité sur le long terme et une préservation de cet équilibre qui, comme je vous le disais tout à l'heure, est assez, à mon avis, précaire en ce moment à l'île Maurice. Voilà.
Merci Pablo. Moi, je continue en anglais. Donc, clearly, we've seen that there is a new normal that is being shaped, and we need to adapt to that. And this is exactly what has been done in this during this pandemic. And board has taken the necessary steps to adapt to this new normal. And now, my third question goes to you, Amédée. When we talk about corporate governance, we have in mind generally additional layers that a company must add to fulfill its obligations, when in fact it has a larger definition relating to, I state, accountability, transparency, responsibility, fair treatment, meritocracy, management disciplines, and fight against corruption. And here I would like to refer to public sector governance. In your opinion, Amédée, are our public sector institutions effective enough to foster good corporate governance?
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Arnaud avait fermé la parenthèse, et là, j'ai ouvert la parenthèse pour moi. Well, I think the issue of good governance with respect to public sector institutions is, I would say, almost totally unrelated to COVID, because the problem dates back since a long time. What is the problem? It has been said, rightly so by many eminent authors, economists, that one of the reasons of the good success of what some have called the Mauritian miracle has been, one, that we had a good entrepreneur class, sorry, and second, that we had viable performing institutions. Regrettably, unfortunately, since a number of years, one of the issues that we all talk about, and rightly so, is the declining quality of the public sector institutions. And I'll go to explain, try to explain, why we are in that situation and what is it that can be done. But before I do that, let me just ask a question. Are there anyone in the room coming from the public sector as an individual? You may not represent your organization. Anyone?
Yes.
Yeah, one. Bravo. Two. Great. 3. 5. Okay. Well, bravo. Bravo to be here.
Not presently, but I've been in the past. Frequently.
Okay, that's good, that's good, that's good. Well, bravo to be here. The invitation to this panel discussion was an open invitation, right? So it was not directed only at the private sector, it was open. Yet, only 5 persons probably representing themselves, but coming from the public sector institutions. I have for years, in one way or another, been in the heart, practiced the public sector, the state, and I do know that meetings like this to discuss issues of corporate governance, good corporate governance, practice of good corporate governance is very, very, very rare, if not inexistent. But let me clarify first. There's no one basket. There are different categories. One is what I could classify as the regulatory bodies, right? Regulatory bodies, FSC, GRA, Registrar of Companies, MSB, and others. There are 2 imperatives to regulatory bodies. One, they must be seen and they must indeed be independent. 2, they must inspire total trust by their competence and their fairness. If a regulatory body cannot be that, then we do have a problem, and we may have had a problem like the blacklist, right, as a consequence. Then you have the law enforcement institutions, ICAC, FIU, which is a different category, but a category which is equally important with the regulators, because they are law enforcement. And because they are law enforcement, again, they need, like the regulators, to be not only perceived, but seen to be independent. And there's only one way you do that. The appointment. Who appoints and who determines the existence of the or the persons that has the responsibility of that institution is absolutely critical. And right now, these persons are political appointees. Not political appointees dans le sens vague du terme, but by law. By law, they are political appointees. By law, they do not have security of tenure, right? So they cannot really be independent. Then you have the SOEs. Among the SOEs, you have those who are forced to abide by the corporate governance and compliance rules of their trade, like banks, State Commercial Bank, Mobank, etc., or insurance, like SICOM, right? But you also have others, like SIC, SIL, etc., who do not have these regulatory obligations. Then another category is what I call the service providing parastatals or public institutions, CWA, wastewater, CB, agricultural marketing board, and finally, a multitude of policy implementation bodies that we call parastatals. I wanted right from the beginning to make a distinction between these categories, and that is extremely important because the founding instrument of all the institutions are the different laws that are provided for how the board is constituted, who appoints the directors, who appoints the chairman, etc., etc. And within that debate, I will bring another level, which is the level of the executive within the institutions. Between what is supposed to be and the practice, there is a huge gap. What is supposed to be is that the board, in any of these institutions, the board is supposed to nominate, to appoint, to recruit executives, including the CEOs. In practice, that is not so. I'll tell you of an anecdote. I was, as you know, chairman of Enterprise Mauritius for some time. So at one point we needed a CEO, and I said, advertise. And as I didn't want to be involved in the recruitment process, I said, okay, advertise and get some consulting firm to do the selection, right? And provide the board with 3 candidates. As soon as it appeared on the newspaper, I got a call from the permanent secretary. Tabla, what have you done? What have I done? But you advertised the job of the CEO. I said, yeah, I need a CEO. We need a CEO. He said, no, the minister is extremely angry. I said, okay, ask the minister to call me. So the minister called me, he said, come and see me. So I went to see him. What's the problem? He said, but you can't advertise. I said, why? The board is supposed to choose. How do we choose? We can't get it from thin here. We do an advertisement, which is fair, we get the best, etc. Normal thing. Yeah, but don't you know that we appoint? Oh, Well, I knew it well, but I didn't want to follow it. I said, oh, what do you mean? He said, well, we have to appoint. It must be somebody we know. So I stood my ground. I offered my resignation, stood my ground, and finally we went through the process, and the CEO was recruited through that process. The board decided, and the next thing, I informed, at least as a matter of courtesy, I informed the minister. So the board has decided, so and so has been appointed. And he said, there's a problem. I said, what? What is the problem? Don't you know that he comes from this party, which is our adversary? I said, well, that question was not on the interview list. But this is not unique. This is exactly how it happens. Now, the Code of Corporate Governance is not just for the private sector. It is for the public sector. It is for the public sector bodies or institutions. And it is recognized. It is recognized. I don't know how many of you have read the National Audit Office Act and has read the National Audit Office report. I'm sure most of you have not read it, but it's fascinating to read. Well, it's quite long, about 378 pages, but you can read the parts of interest. I'm going to read to you one part of it which is totally relevant to what we are discussing, namely the acknowledgement that the Code of Corporate Governance is equally important public sector. So I read, one of the reports recently of the National Audit Office says the following: the Statutory Bodies Accounts and Audit Act, as subsequently amended in 2015, provides that every statutory body shall cause to be prepared an annual report which shall consist of 1. The financial statements in respect of the financial year to which the report relates. 2. A report on the activities of the statutory body during the financial year. And 3. A corporate governance report in accordance with the National Code of Corporate Governance. That's why the Bureau de l'Audit, as we call it, national, right, recognize and insist and underline that public institutions have to follow that. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen, right? And I'll come later about why it doesn't happen and can it be made to happen. Now there is something else. There's another institution called the Office of Public Sector Management, right? Which falls under the Ministry of Good Governance, right? Financial Services, I think, and Good Governance. Right? The OPSG was set up as a kind of body to monitor the implementation, the application, the practice of good corporate governance in the public sector, but also importantly in all of what we call generally the parastatal and the SOEs that exist in this country. I went on the site of the OPSG. I worked closely with the OPSG, not at the OPSG, and I knew for quite long that this was a relatively weak institution. I went onto their site, their last report dates to 2017, right? However, in that report, you can read the following. The mandate of the OPSG includes the monitoring of performance of public sector enterprise. To this effect, the OPSG has developed the parastatal information management system. I'm sure most of you don't know about this, that it exists, which is called PIMS, which is a new web-based system which links to parastatal bodies for them to input online both financial and non-financial information about their performance. So, what I'm saying basically is that a system has been established, whether by way of that law, Statutory Bodies Audit Act, by way of institutions, the National Audit Office and the OPSG, a system has been established to monitor, to help, to support, to evaluate the application of good governance within the context of the Code of Good Governance, but more generally, the principles, the values of good governance in the public sector institutions. However, I have always believed that the human nature, we humans, one of the most important principles that guides our behavior is our evaluation of penalty and reward. Right from the time we are a kid, we determine what we do or don't do with respect to that principle, penalties and reward. For the private sector, private companies, the code of good corporate governance is not just a moral obligation. It also answers to the same principle of penalties and rewards. Because if you don't have that good corporate governance, there will be penalties with respect to your customers, your shareholders, your employees, etc. I know as well explained it, right? But how does that principle of penalties and reward apply to SOEs and to public institutions? How does it apply? Okay, the institution is not being run well, all that Sheila said is not being done properly, right? There are soupçons de corruption, non-performance, etc., etc. What happens? Where is the penalty if good governance doesn't exist? I'll tell you where the penalty is, and this is where the system is lopsided, right? Whereas in the public sector, right, the prime motivator of those who are on the board in the executive is performance. In the public sector, I always call it, when you are on the board or the executive, chief executive, manage for survival. Don't manage for performance, manage for survival. Right? I'm being extremely cynical, but this is the reality. Right? Because the system of appointments, of decision, who sits where, right, responds to other criteria. Most of those sitting on boards manage for their survival rather than manage in the spirit of good corporate governance to ensure the best of performance that is required to support the development of the country now more than ever. I see you are looking at your time or stuff.
Thank you, Amédée. So clearly we got the message. Governance applies to public sector, and there is a strong need to make it happen. So now we move on to Arno. We all know COVID-19 started as a public health crisis, and later it evolved into a financial and economic crisis of epic proportions. And during the process, corporate boards have had to face a string of difficult decisions. Let's take the question of dividend payment, for instance. Normally, this decision is a simple matter, right? You apply a stated dividend policy and that's it. But this year, with COVID-19 decimating the economy and the looming uncertainty about the depth and duration of the crisis, and notwithstanding government call for dividend cuts as well, this decision is not an easy one. So coming back to the issue of dividend payment, what are your views on, from a governance perspective, on the reputational and signaling effects of maintaining versus suspending or reducing dividend?
Bonne question. Alors, pour ma part, je pense qu'il faut enlever toute notion, premièrement, politique, et allons dire, toute idée qu'on peut avoir que le shareholder, quelque part, ne doit pas être rémunéré. Et je le disais tout à l'heure, je pense que chacun a droit à son fair share of profit or loss à un moment donné. Et quelque part, personnellement, je ne suis pas d'accord de voir que les gouvernements se permettent de réguler la politique de dividendes, de rémunération des entreprises, donc des actionnaires. À ce moment-là, pourquoi ne pas réguler la politique des salaires? Pourquoi ne pas caper les salaires? Pourquoi ne pas empêcher le paiement de bonus, et etc., etc. Donc, personnellement, je pense que c'est au conseil d'administration des entreprises, sur la bonne foi de leur balance sheet, la bonne foi de la capacité à payer, leur bonne foi de leur analyse du contexte macroéconomique, socio-économique, à décider si elles doivent ou pas payer un dividende. Nous avons vu à l'île Maurice notamment que le secteur bancaire a été empêché de payer un dividende au moins jusqu'au 31 décembre 2020. It's a regulated company. Amédée parlait tout à l'heure là donc de ces régulateurs qui doivent en tout cas être perçus et vus comme indépendants. Je pense que dans ce cas bien particulier, ils ont peut-être leur mot à dire, et en tout cas, c'est une directive qui est, pour ma part, respectée. Dans le cas de compagnies non régulées, et surtout de compagnies cotées en bourse, où nous avons aussi la responsabilité donc des actionnaires qui, pour beaucoup d'entre eux, vivent d'un dividende, les fonds de pension qui ont investi à nos côtés, et toutes ces entreprises ont besoin donc eux aussi d'une rémunération. Alors, comme je le disais, il en va de la responsabilité du conseil d'administration, du management, de venir jauger de cette capacité de payer. Et Covid ou pas Covid, nous avons vu les entreprises, en tout cas de notre groupe, ne pas être en mesure de payer des dividendes avant le Covid, être en mesure de payer des dividendes après le Covid. Et pour moi, en tout cas, c'est un débat que je ne souhaiterais pas avoir et que personnellement, je n'entretiens pas parce que je n'ai pas besoin de justifier les décisions qui sont prises par les conseils d'administration de compagnies privées, cotées en bourse, avec un nombre important d'actionnaires, est en mesure de surcroît de payer leurs dividendes tant qu'elles sont en mesure également de passer leur test de solvency, de continuer à rémunérer leurs actionnaires, de payer leurs employés et de continuer à jouer leur rôle pleinement dans la société dans laquelle elles évoluent.
Thank you, Arno. That was very frank, I would say, answer. And so we know that it's the board who needs to decide, and there's the element of fairness that we need to pay attention to from a shareholder perspective as well. So I move on to the next question, Aruna. Whether COVID-19 is truly an inflection point for corporate governance, well, this is yet to be seen. But there is no doubt that the pandemic has challenged the core premises of our governance model. And this, in ways, that this has implications for the board. And as boards will go through the annual self-assessment process, they will want to review the readiness and state of capabilities. And one important issue that I'm referring to here is the board diversity, which is in line with the principle 2 of the code. We all know that board diversity matters, but right now there is so much conversation about adding more females to the board, and everyone feels like, okay, we are having 10 directors, so we need to appoint one woman. So Aruna, being the only one panelist member here, so should we discontinue this unconscious bias of concentrating of only one form of diversity, or even the thought of saying, oh, we have an opening. Do you know anyone? What are your views about this?
Thank you, Sheila. On the issue of board diversity, we still have some work to do. The NCCG is well alive to that fact, and last year we actually set up a working group called Diversity and Inclusiveness on Boards, with a prime focus on building more inclusiveness and diversity onto the boards of both the public and the private sectors. The objectives of that working group are, amongst others, to encourage greater diversity in terms of thought, experience, knowledge sharing at board level across the industry, to stimulate research papers at tertiary level on the subject matter, to create thought leadership in the D&I space, and possibly to develop a D&I charter to encourage voluntary adherence thereto, i.e. a concept of each company setting out its own KPIs and reporting on those KPIs with regard to D&I. The working group will shortly be surveying the top 100 companies, including large parastatal and state-owned enterprises, to actually gather factual data on the D&I space, and the idea is from there onwards to develop an action plan. As regards gender diversity, which is one component of the larger board diversity framework, it would be really good if we could stop saying, are we compliant if we get 1 or 2 female directors on the board? I mean, really, that's not good. And it reflects badly on our society. Perhaps when there is a vacancy on the board, or if you feel you want to increase the size of the board, we could move on to a more logical process, which would be, firstly, to assess what set of skills your board requires, which is missing at the moment. And then secondly, to look at the gender balance. And here, the starting premise should really be 50-50, not 20%, not 30%, and please, not one female representative or two female representatives. It really reflects badly on our society, especially when we have expats and foreign directors working with us. And then, if there is a need to rebalance that gender parity, then we could try sourcing female candidates. And please, again, let's stop that argument that there are not enough female candidates around. There are plenty of female executives and in senior management positions. After all, not all male directors are star performers. So let's be fair and give a chance to the female candidates as well.
Thank you, Arina, for this. Okay, lastly, let us now touch base on governance from a macro perspective. And this goes to you, Amélie. You have had a long career in politics, and you have been a member of parliament for 18 years. Also, you participated in the preparation of Africa governance report in the period 2005 to 2012. So while the concept of corporate governance has existed for centuries, the name did not come into vogue until the 1970s. It is important to recall that in Mauritius as a country, it has made quite some progress in governance matters, and here I'm referring to MIoD Index. And so, Amélie, if you are asked to take a critical eye to governance on a macro level, what would be your views?
Simple and much shorter answer. I will not feed you with what you already know, feel, or understand. But I want to bring your mind to the following. What is a country and what is a state? What is Mauritius? What is the government of Mauritius? Because that's where governance anchors at the highest level. It's what we used to call some years ago Mauritius Inc. Imagine it as a big corporate. We have the permanent secretaries who are the executives that we appoint to get things done. The cabinet is the board to make the decisions. The shareholders is the whole population, but of course, the AGM is held every 5 years, which is normal, which we accept. So because it is held every 5 years, we have agreed with the system because it's inbuilt. The issue of accountability and transparency is well inbuilt in our system. We have agreed, therefore, because as shareholders, we go to AGM every 5 years, we have agreed to delegate some of us, namely 70 of us, to be our representatives. That's the parliament, right? So basically, there is inbuilt in the system the capacity for proper governance. If we make proper choices as shareholders, if those in parliament remember this sacrosanct term, parliament is supreme. It's not cabinet that is supreme. It's not government that is supreme. Parliament is supreme. And parliament has a duty to ensure transparency. I don't know how many of you realize that when you have the budget, now the budget is not just the big speech by the Minister of Finance. There's something after that called the Committee of Supplies. Now the Committee of Supplies, logistic book like that, it's item by item of expenses that for any and every ministry and anyone in Parliament has the right, okay, X whatever amount, purchase of vehicles. Anyone at any time can say, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask a question on that. Anything. So you have a system which provides for that, for the transparency, for the accountability. You have the Public Accounts Committee. I don't know why some are saying that they are limited. I was a member of the Public Accounts Committee years ago. I didn't find it so limited. We could call any permanent secretary, any civil servant, grill a civil servant. I remember one of those we grilled in the old days was Namina Karu. So we could do it. I don't know why some are complaining that, well, it's too limited. Then we have something else, which has been lost through successive government, the select committees. This is provided in our system. The select committees are committees determined by Parliament, who says, okay, 9 members or whatever number, sit down, here is an issue, look at that issue. I was honored and thrilled to be a member of the select committee on the probability of having an airport in the north those days. So it allows debates, looked at all kinds of technical papers so that we could have informed decisions of Parliament, informed decisions of government. If there are no select committees now, I don't buy anybody telling me, no, it's because government doesn't want. No, there are ways to get it done. So basically what I'm saying, we have a system which provides for governance in all the sense that we define it, transparency, accountability, etc., etc. If it's not working, it's maybe, not maybe, for me it's clear, we have a problem with the quality of the human resource that we have. That's basically the problem. You can't do a system doesn't produce results. Even if in a private sector you follow all the principles, etc., but if the human element in a system does not provide what it needs to provide, then we fail. So basically what I'm saying, we have a huge company called Mauritius. We have a system which is like in any corporate. We do have a toll order, and my buck stops at Parliament, not the country. Parliament can go up to actually stopping a law. Parliament can go to reversing a law. You have the right to enter a petition in Parliament. Simply, most people don't know the laws of Mauritius. Most people don't know the rights that the laws provide you as a shareholder, as a stakeholder. You don't know. You have the right to enter a petition in Parliament. So, maybe the shareholders we should shake ourselves and try to make those who we have delegated responsibility to make sure that the board, cabinet, does its job properly. Maybe we should. Thank you.
Thank you, Amide, for these insights. Now let us spend the last 5 minutes on the lightning round. So 3 quick and last questions. So Arno, very first question. If there's one thing you want the audience to remember as a result of our discussion today, the conversation that we had, what would that be?
Si l'audience n'était pas aussi large, j'aurais été un peu plus controversial, disons, mais bon, je vais rester dans les, dans les lignes. Non, honnêtement, je pense qu'avec avec une gouvernance irréprochable, je crois qu'on peut aller très loin. Je crois qu'on a énormément de résilience si on travaille sur la gouvernance, d'avoir une bonne idée de business, d'avoir une bonne banque qui nous soutient, d'avoir des actionnaires qui nous font confiance. Je dirais que tout ça, c'est assez facile. Mais de faire tout ça fonctionner et s'assurer qu'on va dans la bonne direction n'est possible qu'avec vraiment une gouvernance irréprochable. Et franchement, si j'ai quelque chose à retenir, c'est que travaillons chacun dessus, travaillons chacun à notre niveau, en tant qu'actionnaire de compagnie privée ou en tant qu'actionnaire de Mauritius Inc. On a tous un rôle à jouer pour s'assurer qu'on a une gouvernance irréprochable à tous les niveaux.
Thank you, Arnaud. And Amédée, what's the biggest challenge related to the topic?
Okay, simply I would say two for now, right? One, certainly I'll join Arnaud that there is an urgency and imperative for, I won't say good governance, I'll say improved governance in a number of public institutions. I'll be modest, I'll say at least in those who matter most, to ensure that these institutions play an effective role in the engine of development and growth of the economy. So that would be one of the challenge and one of the focus that we should have. And the second one, I think it's time that, and I take the cue from Aruna, that we start introducing and distilling the principles of corporate governance in non-listed and medium-sized companies. I won't say small, maybe too early, but medium-sized companies and non-listed, I think it's time that we start distilling that there for their own good, for their own sake, but also to broaden more and more the acceptance, the support, the advocacy for good corporate governance.
Thank you, Amédée. And I think here you're talking about PIEs, is it? Yeah. And just to inform you that the MIoD will be having collaborative with the Financial Reporting Council, targeting the PIEs, and the aim would be to raise awareness there with respect to corporate governance matters. Anyway, you will be informed duly about the event. Coming back to Aruna, what's the one thing you did that gave you a complete sense of satisfaction with respect to corporate governance? And maybe add any concluding remarks that you want to bring in.
Thank you, Sheila. The lawyer in me jumps at the word complete satisfaction. I'm allergic to that. But, okay, to answer the question, maybe we've added some more structure at the level of the NCCG, and we are working on a number of projects quietly behind the scene. You probably heard that we signed an MOU in November with the Education Division of the ICAC to reinforce integrity in the public and private sectors by preventing corrupt practices and money laundering. We are currently collaborating with ICAC on a number of educational initiatives. The other thing we did, we spent a lot of time last year working on the elaboration of a corporate governance scorecard for Mauritius, because there is to date no comprehensive tool to measure the corporate governance status of entities in Mauritius. So the scorecard is meant to fill up that gap. A draft scorecard is now ready and has been circulated to the stakeholders of the industry for their comments. So we will be holding public consultation workshops on the 9th and the 11th of February. And I would like to encourage you to attend the workshops or to forward us your comments on the draft scorecard. The other thing is we've revamped the NCCG website where we put a lot of information about what we are doing, but it will go live only next week, so I encourage you to visit our website for more info. We are working also on a number of other projects which have not yet matured. As a concluding comment, perhaps, the one thing that struck me about the pandemic is that it is forcing companies now to face up to the reality that business operates within society and is not some standalone activity independent from the real world. There has been a tendency for companies to think that the world of business is a world of its own and that government is at best an annoyance. Clearly, we have seen that government is a necessity and that it's probably the only player with enough scale to help in this scale of crisis. But then companies as well are of a scale that they too have obligations and need to consider their role in supporting and collaborating with their stakeholders. There is a debate currently going on in the UK on this subject, which they call the Section 172 debate, related to directors' liability. But let's keep things simple. And what we have all learned from COVID-19 is that stakeholder relationships really matter, and that these relationships need to be fostered in good times so that they survive the difficult times. The need to think about stakeholders is universally necessary for the long-term business prosperity.